Hello, friends. Welcome back to the show. We have such a juicy, special, incredible guest here today, which I'm so excited. If I could have told myself, 8 years ago that I would be interviewing Jera for the podcast, I would have said, "Yeah, crazy." So today we have the one and only Jera Fosterfell, aka Jera, who is a social media coach, speaker, and content creator. Jera teaches the ins and outs of creating your own personal brand online, the secrets to building a loyal and engaged community, and all of the steps that it takes to use social media as a powerful and positive tool for your business. She is the founder of the Social Media Saloon, an intensive group coaching course, which I can personally say is incredible because I've seen the inside of it. She also has created social media programs for major brands like MAC Cosmetics and has led social media bootcamp series trainings for hundreds of people on TikTok for companies like Estee Lauder and Adobe. As a creator, Jera has her own TikTok following at 1.5 million followers, which I will say she grew it to 1 million in just under a year, which was really cool watching her do that. And her content focuses primarily on teaching the ins and outs of the platform, whether it's trend tutorials, content creation strategy, or analyzing how brands are embracing short form video content. So, Jera, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jess. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I have to share a story. I love to do the formal bio, but I also like to do the informal bio. As the guests that I have on, usually I have a personal relationship with. And I don't know if you know this, but back when I was a teacher, back in my day, back when I was a teacher, this was probably 2010. When did I leave? I left in 2017. So it was probably like 2015, 14. I used to follow you. And this was at the time that you were an Adidas gal, you were a SoulCycle instructor. I think this was probably around the time it was your journey to becoming a SoulCycle instructor. And I used to follow you and a couple of the girls that you were friends with. And I used to say to myself, I think I can do this. And I don't know what this was, but it was whatever you were doing. It was, I think I could create content. I think I could create a community. I think I could create brand awareness. And maybe at the time, I even thought that I could maybe get brand deals because I had been a trainer for over a decade at the time. And I had already been creating a fitness community online and doing these monthly kind of fitness field trips. You were one of the reasons that I actually quit my teaching job.
Really?
Yeah. And then the crazy thing, because you were paving the path, you were showing me what's possible. And so it was this sort of blend between, could I be like a Jera, kind of at the time, for lack of a better term, like an influencer / I thought I was going to be the next Jillian Michaels. And so how can I marry the two and use social media to do that? And you were paving the path. And so you really, truly were one of the reasons that I quit my job. And the funny thing was, fast forward, I quit in 2017. And then in 2019?
2019. Are we getting to when we worked together?
Yeah, 2019. You came and knocking at my DMs. I nearly fell over and you were like, "Hey, can we meet for coffee?" And I'm like, "What? What?" And so we met in Union Square Park in New York and we sat down and talked about how we could work together. And we had about a year and a half working relationship as a client, and I was helping you build out the saloon, and it was just such a surreal moment. So I just owe so much to you, and I give you so much credit, and I acknowledge you, and I have so much love and gratitude for the way that you show up online, and you have consistently shown up like that for, the 8 years I've been following you. So I just want to give you credit where credit is due.
Well, thank you. And that's so nice. And I love hearing that. And I love also looking back on the moment that I remember so vividly, meeting in Union Square Park, because I really can zero in on that moment. And there's a few moments in my life where I'm like, wow, that's when things really started to change, or this is when I took a pivot. And that really, to me, is one of those markers. And you are me like, oh, I, kind of wanted to be like Jera. I think at that time I was like, Jess has this all figured out. Like, I want to be like Jess. So that was my moment, just sort of reflected back at you. And that was really special when so much started to change for me.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I would love actually if we start here, because the conversation that we had in the park was kind of, I know I have something. At the time you had 100,000, 200,000 followers or something on Instagram. You weren't on TikTok yet, but you said, I know I have something, I just don't really know what it is. And I think that so many people run into this, especially for both of us, right? We both coach people and building businesses and showing up on social media. And so many times people come kind of twiddling their thumbs going, I know I'm meant for more. I know I have something to teach or share, but what is it? And I know you teach about the secret sauce and stuff all the time. So how do you help people? What would you say to someone who is a little uncertain? How do you help them sort of extract what it is? What's the thing?
Yeah, well, I think, hit the nail on the head right away by bringing up that idea of secret sauce. And for anyone who's listening who's like, what's the secret sauce? Is that on my hamburger? Well, it could be some secret sauce on the hamburger, but I think of the secret sauce as your authenticity. It's your uniqueness. It's the elements that set you apart. And there's a saying out there that is extremely corny. I always give this warning with it, but I truly believe it. And it's that nobody else in the world is you, and that is your superpower. So
Yeah.
anytime someone is within any sort of niche, like take the niche of fitness or nutrition or mindset or whatever it could be, sewing, arts and crafts, there could be, and there likely are, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands out there who are doing the same thing as you, talking about the same things as you, selling the same things that you are, but not a single one of them has your unique blend of secret sauce. What I mean by that is that's elements of the past within you and elements of the present. So if we're thinking about the past, it's the experiences that brought you to where you are today. It's the challenges you've overcome. It's the aha moments, the pivots. And if we think about the present moment, it's your personality, it's your energy. It's also not necessarily just the big major things, but it's also the mundane, routine, small moments in your day to day as well that you might not think are so significant, like the little things that pop into your head or the little habits that you have. But all of those elements between the past, present, personality, big, small, make up your secret sauce. And so when someone's really wondering, like, how do I stand out? How do I figure out what sets me apart? I have a whole method for kind of diving into all of those secret sauce elements I mentioned. And I think it's a really powerful thing to do just as a person and as a
Yeah.
business. But if we're thinking about social media and how to craft your presence and really stand out in a digital way, that's such a key component as well.
Is that the cure for saturation?
Ooh, yeah, I think so. I think probably a mix of secret sauce and also consistency, because
Mm,
if you have, well, not if you have secret sauce, we all have it, but if you identify and sort of start to tune into your secret sauce, but you aren't really showing up on social media that much, then
right.
you're not giving yourself the opportunity to stand out. So identifying secret sauce, showing up consistently. And I also think to pushing through these moments where things aren't really going your way on social media. So on the days that maybe you lose more followers than you gain, or you haven't had a reel perform well in a while, or no one's answering the question you asked in your caption, it's really easy to show up when everyone's clapping, when the views are
Mm.
there, when you're getting followers and all that, but it's much more challenging to show up when things aren't going your way. So I think it's a combination of the secret sauce, consistency, and continuing to show up when no one is necessarily giving you that feedback.
Yeah, I love that. I definitely want to circle back on something you said, but I also want to just ask this question. If people know who you are, and a lot of people do, and they follow you and they've been following you for years, like I have, I think of your secret sauce and you're goofy, you're funny, you do armpit farting, you make funny voices, you're eating your cheese and crackers, you do funky dances, you take a picture every year on your birthday with a crown where you're crying.
Yep.
So your secret sauce is like very obvious. What would you tell the person who's like, but I'm not that interesting, but I'm not that quirky, or I'm scared to really truly be myself? Like, how do you help someone really come out and be open on social media and be vulnerable and really be authentic? Because it's hard when there are people judging you.
Definitely. And so a good point there is whenever I teach secret sauce, I do like to show examples of my own, as you so beautifully recounted, with armpit farting and sad birthday princesses and dances and all that kind of stuff. But my secret sauce is my unique secret sauce. And so your secret sauce or anyone else's is going to be reflective of who they are. So if you
Mm,
are not a silly, goofy, wacky person, your secret sauce does not have to be silly, goofy, wacky, funny, etc. So perhaps you are more introspective and wise and centered and grounded, or maybe you're really kind of witty and dry humor and sarcastic. Maybe you are just someone that has this calming energy that you bring to people, or maybe you have like a ton of energy or whatever it is. Like, it's about owning the parts of you that make you you. So full permission to
Yeah.
not be my type of secret sauce if that's not what you are. So
Yeah.
that's one thing. In terms of showing up in a more vulnerable way, because I think that regardless of what your personality and energy is, there's opportunity to show up vulnerably. Three things that I like to teach and keep in mind for someone who's unsure. Keep in mind, these are just guidelines to potentially follow. They're not rules, but they're really helpful when you're like, I don't really know how to do this. They're ways to get started. So, first one is thinking of, no, actually, I'm going to begin with that vulnerability is something that you can stick to within your niche. So
Mhm.
what I mean by that is, let's say you are a fitness instructor and in the past, or maybe also in the present, you've struggled with body image. To me, that's very related to your niche, because in the field of fitness, there's a lot of body stuff going on. So to
Yeah.
me, if you shared about struggling with body image, that would make sense within your niche. But if you are going through a really painful breakup or divorce, I'm not saying you can't share that. You absolutely can, but that's an example of something that isn't really in your fitness niche. So if you're unsure, okay, maybe you share more about the body image for now, as that's related. And maybe if you want to test the waters later when you're feeling more comfortable sharing about the breakup, the divorce, etc. So that's number one, vulnerable topics within your niche.
Love that.
Number two is sharing the scar, not the scab. And what that means is sharing something that you've healed from. There is a lesson that you've learned, so that when you share that vulnerable topic, you're not just sharing the thing that has affected you, but also the lesson that you've learned from it. Sometimes it can feel more comfortable when you share the experience and you have a takeaway for people who are listening or reading. And then the third one is more of just an overall concept of the fact that it's not all or nothing. So vulnerability isn't an on or off switch. Instead, if you think about it like a dial, you can have a little bit more grace with yourself. So it's not either I am vulnerable or I am not vulnerable. It's okay, maybe I really notice that my vulnerability is at like a 0 or a 1 right now, or whatever it is on between 1 to 10. And I'm going to see what it's like to turn it up to a 3 or a 4 by sharing topics that are within my niche. And maybe I'll just stay there. Maybe I
Yeah.
never get to a 10. Like, the goal isn't necessarily to get to a 10. That doesn't make sense for every single person, but it is to sort of identify, where are you now? Where would you like to be? Does it make sense to turn up that dial a little bit?
I think, what you're saying is so powerful. And there's such a fine line. I've had this conversation so many times. When we think of trauma, right, people talk about big T and little t. So big T trauma would be things like maybe sexual harassment or rape or death, like big trauma. And then little trauma, little t trauma would be more along the lines of maybe something your parents said in passing that you then carried with you. So a lot of times people will say, my trauma isn't big enough for me to share, right? And so it's almost like I don't have enough to share that's worthy of sharing. Or when it comes to vulnerability, it's what's the point isn't even enough. And how do you sort of dance between sharing too much or too often or not enough? And sometimes I feel that people can almost use that storytelling and vulnerability as like marketing. And so it gets to a point where there's this gray area of like, okay, well, now are you just using this as marketing? Is this actually manipulative? Are you leaning on this trauma or this vulnerability? And then on the other side of the coin, are you not speaking up because you don't think it's enough, bad enough, vulnerable enough, deep enough? So I just wonder if you've ever experienced that yourself or with clients.
Oh, yeah, that's tough because it's like both sides of the coin. And so everything's always a balance. And I think overall, it's just kind of testing the waters. And I think sometimes we might share vulnerably and then go, ooh, I posted that. And you know what? I don't actually, like, you can self reflect, like, I don't know if my intentions were actually that
Mm.
great sharing that. Like, maybe it took actually posting it to really feel and reflect. Sometimes maybe your intentions were good, but there's that vulnerability hangover. And even
Mm.
though it wasn't for a sales tactic or manipulative, it just maybe you turn the dial up a little bit too much. And so it's self-reflecting in that sense. Going back to what you said about like, what's the point? People think their little t isn't big enough. I think that as humans, we just need to share all ends of the spectrum, depending on how comfortable you are, because there's always someone out there who needs to hear that message. And it doesn't have to be the biggest, grandest, most life-changing things in order for it to have an impact on them. If I think about like less of sharing vulnerably, but I'll like sort of relating this to just sharing the everyday and the mundane and the routine, that's when people connect with me the most. I feel like
Yeah.
even when it's something silly and like a little inside joke, like I started sharing about eating cheese and crackers back in January, and like people love that. Like people are so into the cheese and crackers, and I could never have predicted, I would never have gotten up in front of my students or on a stage and been like, hey everyone, so share mundane things like slicing up cheese and putting it on crackers and eating it, because people are just going to love it. I just have this feeling. So to me, even though that's kind of a funny thing, we can relate that also to the more vulnerable aspects of us and sharing those things that maybe we think are what's the point.
Sure.
And those little things can often have such a great impact. So
Yeah.
just a little encouragement around that. And then going back to that idea of, is someone sharing as a marketing tactic, as some sort of sales type of thing? I think the person sharing really needs to tap to the intention behind it. I think these days we can, as consumers, are much more aware of how and why people are sharing things too. So I think it's about being smart as a person on the receiving end of that content as well.
Yeah, personal responsibility. It's so interesting too, because I think we sometimes assume vulnerability means negative or heaviness. It has to be like the dark sides and the shadows. But also I'm thinking of you taking roller skating lessons and both of us doing shuffling, right?
Yes. Yes. Oh my God. I'm so glad you brought that up, because it goes exactly with everything that we're talking about. However, something that I've come to realize in the last year is that oftentimes people will ask me, or I'll hear in passing, like, what is the point of sharing XYZ in general? Or what is the point of sharing XYZ if it has absolutely nothing to do with my business? And so I'm so glad you brought up shuffling, because I need to get back into it.
Me
But about
too.
a year ago, I was taking my shuffling lessons, which is, if someone's listening and they don't know what that is, it's a type of dance. And I was sharing all about it. I was awful at it, but I was practicing every day. I was having a blast. I actually got a DM from one of my students, and I have a screenshot of it somewhere, who says that one of the main reasons she joined the saloon was because of the way that I was showing up and sharing my shuffling lessons, that I was a beginner, that I wasn't afraid to just kind of show off where I was in this very beginner stage and kind of struggle through something. And that she related to that, because she knows that's how she would feel learning social media in the saloon. So me being a beginner and showcasing that on my stories, that allowed her to feel welcome and safe in my community as a student. And so that's my rebuttal to people who are like, well, what's the point of sharing my dog? Or what's the point of sharing my favorite restaurant? Or that I'm learning how to draw? Or that I'm out shopping for new clothes? Whatever it is. These things, these little things like cheese and crackers, for example, are sometimes our main connection points into just us as people. And then, of course, on the side as well, us as businesses too.
It's so true. It's kind of like when you're in a room of strangers and you find out that someone went to the same college as you, you have this like instant bond where you're like, yeah, you start singing the fight song, right?
Right.
Okay. So with vulnerability, with sharing different pieces of yourself, I'm going to assume that you occasionally get some feedback, and maybe some not so nice feedback, like haters or trolls or nasty comments. What are some tips or tricks, not to say that that happens to you, but if it ever has, what would be some tips or tricks? How do you sort of navigate that? And how do you mitigate the default feeling of wanting to kind of almost attack back, right? Or like put the person on blast, or I don't know, maybe argue with them, whatever that might be for you.
Yeah, I'll be the first to admit, I don't think I necessarily have the perfect solution. I feel like I've experimented with several ways to react. And yes, I do get mean stuff. I'm very fortunate. It's very far and few between, perhaps in a way that almost makes it harder to receive and to read because it doesn't happen too often. But I kind of think that there are a couple tiers of trolls and negative things that we can come across about us. When I think of like the lightest tier, I kind of think of TikTok, where it's like a random person who doesn't follow you, who's like, this is stupid, or like, I don't like your tutorial, or saying something about your appearance, your hair is styled badly. Like, okay, whatever. They're not fun to receive. It's not nice to read anything negative, but it's kind of like, all right, just brush it off your shoulder. It's such a nothing thing.
Sure.
I think where it gets more challenging is when it's like a personal DM to you in not that I would want it to be public, but it's such an intimate thing to receive. And it's the sort of second tier is a DM, perhaps from someone you've never heard from before. But I've had it happen a few times where it's someone who has actually messaged me very friendly and nice before, and then they sort of turn on you for whatever reason. I think for the negative ones, sort of tier one, it doesn't really make sense to respond to them. These are real trolls who just feed off of, they want you to respond and be like, no, my hair actually looks good. Like, and it just absolutely goes nowhere. That's just not worth the time and energy. And I'm speaking from experience in that I have responded to these before. And I hate that feeling of, ooh, I've responded. I feel good for a moment. And then I'm like checking to see when are they responding? When are they responding? And then it eats into your energy all day. So I try to just ignore that type. I will say for things that are more personal, I have responded in the past, just trying to either defend myself or share my perspective. And the only thing I want to add on to that is it's not going to happen every time, but I had a couple of people reach out a couple months. One of them was a year later, actually apologizing.
Wow.
I've had a few, and I did a post about this maybe a year or so ago, of people who reached out for various reasons, either said not so nice things, rude things, really, really mean things, and then actually totally retracted like months, years later, to explain why they had responded in that way. And so that also gave me a lot of perspective, is that sometimes you get these rude, mean, hateful comments, and it's so easy to internalize it and be like, but this isn't true. How dare you say that? And really, it's coming from something within their own lives that is causing them to lash out at you. And it's much more a them problem than it is a you problem. So that has given me a lot of perspective to receive those apologies as well.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, just someone that has worked with you professionally and then just being friends for so many years, I just want to acknowledge the growth that you have had, because it can feel like such a personal attack on your character, right? And then to recognize that we're all just mirrors for one another, and you may have triggered something in them, and then acknowledge them for seeing that in themselves and coming back and apologizing. It's certainly not free reign to go be a jerk to someone, but it's like, oh, okay, what I said may have triggered them, or how I acted. Of course, the like, your bangs are stupid, that's just like, what? Like, that's what are you doing? Right? That's just mean. But certainly, I think when you're putting out content that's either vulnerable or polarizing, you're sort of opening yourself up for conversation. And I know that polarity and polarizing content does really well. And a lot of times the most polarizing type of content gets the most views, it gets the most shares, which egoically could feel really important for our business, because we're like, yeah, it's going viral, which we both know virality is not necessarily a good thing. What is your opinion right now on, I don't even know if you're attuned to it, but there's definitely a lot of two sides happening in the coaching industry. There's kind of two sides. There's a lightness and a dark happening in the digital marketing space. And there's sort of a lot of like hate accounts where one side is bashing the other side and vice versa. And I think that there's a fine line between bashing, but then also standing in your own power and saying what you truly do believe in. So how do you navigate, or do you just avoid kind of, this is what I believe in, this is what I stand for, this is who I stand for, rather than the opposite? I know I had a conversation recently on here with Amanda Bucci, who beautifully had said to me a while back, like, do you really need to be anti-vanilla, or can you just be pro-chocolate, right? So like, how do you see this as people look up to you? you're an expert. They're expecting you to say something around all sorts of topics. Do you feel I'm going to stand in my power and say what I stand for? Do you sort of take the laid back approach, or are you like, no, go be polarizing?
Ooh, that's wait, Jess, can we pause for a second and just, I want to make sure I understand the question. Are we kind of talking more about like I'm seeing other coaches do things that I don't agree with, or are we talking about this more in like the politics?
I think both.
In both.
I think it could be both. Yeah.
Okay.
Because there has been so much cancel culture and the politics and become an advocate and speak up. And then over here on like the coaching, it's like what the coaches are doing that we don't like and what you disagree with. I think it's both.
Yeah. Okay. So reback it. So a couple of things here, and it just sort of sparked a image in my mind within like the Instagram coaching education space, because I have noticed that within my field there are people whose content is kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say bashing, but it's kind of always talking about other people and not necessarily a specific person, but like, oh, the other coaches who do this or who are always talking about this and teaching this. And sometimes I agree with them because there are people in my space who I'm like, I don't necessarily agree with what you're teaching or how you're teaching it. And so I think sometimes it's okay to kind of say, this is what I stand for, this is what I don't stand for, or even to call out specific practices that you don't align with. I think where I start to differ is when your content kind of shifts to always talking about that, because then it is taking on more of this negative tone, and they're like someone else's practices almost becomes your content because you're always talking about it or talking about how you don't do that or that's not your style, etc. So I think a little bit is okay, but I think having it fully become a main content pillar within what you talk about is something I wouldn't recommend. And I think we also have to trust the community to tune into what they're interested in and tune into what they're not interested in. And that's kind of the beauty of the secret sauce of what we were talking about. The more that you bring you into your content and your energy, your values, etc., the more it's going to pull in the right people and also at the same time repel the other people away. So that's kind of my general thoughts on that.
Yeah. Did you ever find yourself in a place of fear to post when there was a lot of canceling going on, or you have such a big account and so many people are looking to you to say something?
Definitely, because I always want to do the right thing. Like I think I always have good intentions, but as we've learned, intentions don't necessarily mean that you are going to do or say the right thing. And I think over the last few years, we've been in, for those who are in the spotlight in some shape or form on social media or whatever, however you want to interpret that, we've really had to show up and learn as we go. We haven't really had the opportunity to learn behind the scenes. Like we've had to do it very publicly. And so to be in a spot where I have to learn and show up at the same time, and also be, I guess, a leader in some sense, wanting to do the right thing. It has been very complicated, and I have felt a lot of pressure over the last few years to really try and do the right thing. But I think a lot of it has been, I don't know what the right thing is. And so if I don't say something or show up, that's the wrong thing. If I do say something and show up, that could be the wrong thing as well. And so it's almost been like, oh gosh, what do I do?
What do I do? Yeah. Paralyzing.
So that's been challenging for sure. And I've had to learn that as I've gone as well.
Well, you do it with grace. You really do. You make it look effortless. And I know that it is not as a leader. Okay, let's shift gears. 1.5 million followers on TikTok. And I very clearly remember your first couple TikToks. In fact, we were in LA at a mastermind together at a retreat, and you were showing the girls and I how to use TikTok. You had a brand new page at the time and you were still figuring it out. what was the shift to move to TikTok? Why it seems like you love it over there? Like, why do you get so excited? How is it different? Is TikTok more important than Reels? And what would you say to someone who's just completely overwhelmed? Because honestly, anytime I get on there, I'm like, oh my God, I can't learn this platform. It's so hard.
I know. But I think the thing that makes it so hard, at least in the beginning, is also the thing that makes it so fun. And so, what I
Mm,
love about TikTok is that it has opened up this door within the social media world to, gosh, there's a lot of things I could say, but I think number one is for us to show up in a much more authentic sense. And so what I mean by that is on Instagram, if we look at kind of the years 2015, maybe all the way up to 2019, 2020, we have been stuck in the highlight reel. Like the feed has to look like a museum, and each photo needs to be an editorial picture out of Vogue, and their captions need to be Pulitzer Prize winning captions, and the videos need to be Oscar worthy. Like, oh my God, that is so exhausting. And so, because of that visual expectation, it's also kind of held us to having to put on a facade. Like, that's where the whole highlight reel phrase comes from, like
sure.
showing the best, always needing things to be look perfect and aspirational. And TikTok is not perfect. TikTok is not, for the most part, not aspirational. TikTok to me is very real, authentic, genuine. It is much more personality and energy based. Like there's many videos, I haven't done one myself, but I really agree with them that the influencers who have done so well on Instagram, for the most part, when they come over to TikTok, not everyone, but they sort of flounder a little bit
Mm,
because they've relied so heavily on the visual perfection, which is totally an art. So I'm not
yeah.
putting that down at all. I mean, I used to be in that world as well. But that doesn't hold up on TikTok. You need to be a storyteller. You need to have a magnetic personality. You need to have a point of view and something to share, whether that's your knowledge or your lifestyle or your information, etc. So
Yeah.
to me, TikTok allows us to tap into more depth of creators. And I think also there is this collaborative energy to TikTok as a social media entertainment platform that doesn't exist on other platforms. And so what I mean by that is we are so used to posting a photo and then it's gone. Like, yes, there's comments and all of that, but it's really sort of a one-way street
Mhm.
versus on TikTok, you post a video and someone can duet it, someone can stitch it, someone can reply to a comment, and then you make a video reply to that comment. Or there's trends, like trends just in and of themselves are two-way streets because an idea exists, you hop onto it, put your own twist on it, post it, someone else hops onto it. And so it's this type of content creation that has so much more energy and it's so much
Mm,
more dynamic than just a stale photo, or to be honest, even reels. Like if you
yeah.
want, let me know if you want me to talk more about that, but reels just really are like the surface, and TikTok with short form video content is like the depths of the ocean and makes it much more exciting than what we kind of experience with video on reels.
Yeah, I'd love to unpack that a little bit because I've heard this now from a lot of people that TikTok just has more depth. So it's not a surprise that short form video is the thing, right? I mean, YouTube has shorts now. We've got TikTok short videos. We've got Instagram short videos on Reels. So are there certain things, three, four, five tips or tricks that you would say like must happen in all shorts, or things to do or look out for when creating a short form video?
It's definitely going to depend on the type of creator or business that you are, but there are definitely a few things. So, one of probably the most, when I say overused pieces of advice, it's very relevant, but it's probably something most people have heard before, but it is so important. It's what is the hook of your video? And
Sure.
that's the first 3 seconds. And we need to, in those 3 seconds, either give context, it needs to be enticing. Someone has to land on it and go, wow, not only am I going to stop my scroll for this, but I'm going to continue watching past these 3 seconds. Like something has to draw that viewer in. And if we are more in the educational space, we're going to think about that with the first sentence that we're saying. If I go, hey everyone, I'm Jera, so I'm going to share a social media tip with you today. Who's going to want to watch that? Like,
Yeah.
hi, I'm Jera. That's not a hook. People don't care that I'm Jera or Sarah or Bob or whoever. But if I go, this social media trick is going to change everything for you. For example, that's just off the top of my head. There's probably a better one, but just think of how not only the sentence, but the energy behind those words, and thinking about the person who is on the receiving end of that video, it's talking to them versus just saying like, hey, I'm Jera. I'm going to tell you something about social media. Like, no one cares about that.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, thinking about those first 3 seconds. I also like to tell people to see if they can take their content idea and give yourself a time constraint. Because yes, we can upload up to 3 minutes, even up to 10 minutes on TikTok now. And if we have that container of time without any sort of structure and we just go into it, we're going to fill it. So if you can write out a loose script of what you're going to say, it doesn't have to be word for word, but I think it's always really surprising how quick 30 seconds goes by. Like, it's just a few sentences if you put it together. And so seeing if you can just do a tiny bit of prep work before you begin to see if you can contain that idea in 30 seconds instead of 60, because retention when it comes to our TikTok videos is huge. That's why we want the hook. We're trying to retain people for as long as we can throughout the entirety of the video, and your success of your particular video will be dependent on that retention. So hook, we want to think about the length. And then, there's a lot of other things I could suggest here, but one thing that comes to mind is pattern interrupts. And pattern interrupts is a way to visually keep people hooked into your video. And so if you're doing a talking to camera video, it could be as simple as changing the angles. So I could be talking here and then put the camera up closer, and then maybe it's further, maybe it's above, maybe it's below, and it's changing for every sentence that I say. It could be the background. It could be my clothes. If you want to get that intense about it, changing your clothes, that takes a lot of effort though. And even just jump cuts, and jump cuts is just jumping from one scene to the next and creating that like type of throughout your videos. So 3 that comes to mind: hooks, really considering your video length, and perhaps playing around with pattern interrupts as well.
Okay, I love that. But when you say pattern interrupt, I feel like sometimes we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to do these crazy fancy transitions. Like you said, changing clothing might be a really big effort. When I look at someone like yourself, who is this incredible content creator who actually does a lot of transitions. I mean, I remember you doing one where you're walking through the door and every time you come through the door, it's a different outfit, right? Or you do all these like really crazy transitions, which is sort of your shtick. Do we all have to do that? Because as soon as I look at you, I'm like, I can't do that. I can't do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to learn that. I'm stressed. I'm overwhelmed. And then I do nothing.
No, you do not. You or anyone listening does not have to do a single transition. And here's why. We have to ask ourselves, well, first, what's the content idea? Is the content idea, I'm going to teach you how to build community, or I'm going to teach you how to set up funnels for your business, or I'm going to share with you my story over the last 3 years and how I pivoted from this to this to this. So it all begins with the content idea. And then the step 2 is to ask yourself, okay, well, I have this idea. How am I going to communicate this idea? And the 4 options that you have within a short form piece of video content is through spoken word, either talking to camera or voiceover. You also have your visuals, which is essentially the video that you're showing, and then also text on screen. I would say more often than not, the more you can have 3 of those elements: talking to camera, visuals, and text on screen, voiceover, visuals, and text on screen, or even all 4. So that's just an aside. But if you ask yourself, okay, this content idea that I have, and then how is it communicated? And you have those 4 options, like, does a transition help to support that idea? Like, do you need a transition to talk about how to build sales funnels? Or do you need a transition to effectively storytell the last 3 years and the pivots that you've had? More often than not, the answer is going to be no. So transitions to me are more of a fun thing to try if you want to. They can have that kind of punchy appeal to quickly share a piece of advice, like, here I am before, like, I'm sad. like text on screen, one tip comes on, transition happens, I've learned it, and now I'm transformed. Like punchy information can be delivered potentially with that. So that is a little bit of an aside, but it's just kind of a glitz and glam way to do it. And it's not necessary for someone who doesn't have the time and energy for it, or doesn't have the skills, or who's simply just not interested in doing it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for the permission. I
Yeah.
recently, working with the team, we've been putting together ideas for different TikToks or different reels, and we've finally recognized that I just prefer to talk to camera. I'm a teacher at heart. I want to just pop that thing into like my ring light and I just want to speak to the camera. And the moment that we either sit me down on a couch and turn the camera around, or I need props, or I need to like act, or we need to do transitions, I get so much resistance that comes up, and I just don't, I'm like a child. I don't want to do it. I throw a fit. So I know that's also an opportunity for me to work through that, right? We want to get out of our comfort zone. And I've recently given myself permission to just show up and speak as that's what I like to do. And there are a lot of accounts that do really, really well doing that. And that's sort of their shtick. So thank you for the permission there. I would love to know, just on a selfish level, and everyone's different, do you batch content? How do you create so much content? What's your sort of MO? Do you, jot ideas down? Do you have a filming day, an editing day? Do you outsource?
Oh, so I always dread this question because I like to teach kind of the opposite of what I do. So
do as I do, not as I say. Do as I say, not as I do.
Let me just preface this. So here's the thing. In an ideal world, batching, and we'll talk about what that is in a second, batching is ideal because most people have a job that isn't social media. Like social media is a part of their overall job or how they have to show up, but social media isn't their job. Like a yoga instructor isn't necessarily a full-time content creator or social media coach, like, but they do need to use social media to support their business, or same with the hairstylist. And so I like to teach the concept of batching in order to make sure that you are showing up consistently. Because if you are just doing things on the fly, sure, you're going to have a couple days where inspiration strikes, you have a little bit of extra time on your hands, and you have this great idea, and you can just get at a couple of posts over a week. You do 3 posts, you're feeling good. Then boom, you're so busy, clients and classes and all these other things, 2, 3, 4 weeks go by and you've barely posted. That kind of situation is where really relying on inspiration and action on the fly just doesn't work. And so the more that you can batch, the better. But let me just say, batching to me doesn't mean sitting down, planning 30 days worth of content, writing all of these captions, filming everything. Like, it doesn't mean doing everything in one sitting, and it doesn't mean planning weeks and weeks and weeks in advance. So a way that is sort of more sustainable to batch is always having a pool of content ideas ready to go, so that you're not sitting down and going, oh, what do I post? You have 30 ideas ready to go, whether they're just very evergreen pieces of content that will always make sense, whether it's something that you came across and you jotted it down earlier in the week, like responding to just something happening on social media. Like right now, the corn song's really popular. Jess, have you heard it?
Yeah.
It's corn on the cob. It's juicy. I don't know. It's stuck in my head and I totally didn't get the words right. I don't know how you would create a piece of content idea around that, but just as an example, like that's so popular right now. So if you do something, actually, I just saw a tattoo artist design a corn tattoo with like the lyrics around it. So there's an example of someone taking the opportunity with corn being popular right now. But anyways, regardless of how you're coming up with those ideas, they are ready to go, so that you go, okay, I'm going to now spend 15 minutes going through my Reels tab, just picking out 2 sounds that are popular, 2 trends that are popular. And that way, when you have those ready to go, you go, oh, I have all these ideas. Now I can just apply this to my niche. So it's essentially just not doing everything all at once.
Yeah.
That's my idea of batching, is just at least grouping some similar tasks together so that you're not always having to have inspiration and also taking action on the fly.
Yeah.
In terms of what I do, social media is my job. Like, I am living, breathing this 24/7. I've also been doing content creation since 2015. I've also been in the video world since I was a wee child, sitting on my mom's lap with like her editing videos and making movies and commercials and all that. So I have all of these, I will say basic, I'm not fancy with editing, but I do have all these editing skills at my fingertips, and I can make videos so fast. Like something that might take someone an hour to make, I can probably do in 10 or 15 minutes.
Oh.
So because I work in social media, because I've been doing content creation since 2015, because I have all these video skills, and I just always have ideas, like I don't personally find the need to batch in. I like to teach to other people. And so that's kind of my caveat. It's like, this is how I do it. I'll be very open about it, but this isn't going to work for most people.
Yeah. I love your honesty there.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in the same boat. I'm always like, don't do what I say, or don't do what I do what I say,
Yes.
right? I'm like, I don't batch because I don't like it. But I also think just even something like a trending reel, trending audio, trending, whatever might be trending, if you're batching 30 days in advance, by the time it comes out for you, by the time you get around to it, it's no longer trending. You sort of miss the boat because it moves so fast.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I feel like with trends specifically, it might not be the best idea to kind of batch them and have them sitting in an arsenal somewhere.
Exactly. But that's why you kind of have those content ideas ready to go, or you're just really, really good at applying trends to your niche because yeah, there's that trend. Let's take advantage of it now. Ooh, I know I want to talk about XYZ, perfect opportunity to do so. So it's like you've already done a little bit of legwork by knowing some of those content ideas. So even in that scenario, there's like an opportunity to batch a little bit. So it's kind of a happy medium.
Yeah. Is it too late to get on TikTok?
Oh my God, no.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. I mean, I would not wait.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure you told me that 2 years ago.
It's definitely not too late. I will say it is a very different place from when I got started. I've seen a lot of changes. I mean, even for me, it's a lot harder for me now to gain traction. I used to be able to like lift my finger and like go viral. And now it's like very, very few videos for me go viral. And even for having 1.5 million followers, like I don't really get a whole ton of views like compared to other people with similar following. So it is a lot more challenging these days, but there's still so much opportunity and it's still such a fun place. So I would just say, don't delay. Get on it today.
All right. I see you. I could literally talk to you all day. We didn't even get to some of the questions I wanted to. We're going to have you back on because I want to talk about selling and oh my God, so many things. But before we put a bow on everything with a couple rapid fire questions, where can everyone find you and what are you working on? What's exciting and new? How can people work with you?
Heck yeah. So I have my course, The Social Media Saloon. I cannot believe it is over 2.5 years old now. I just launched the 7th cohort.
Crazy.
The next cohort will be launched in early 2023. So we've got some time, but you can check it out at jerabean.com.
Who's that for?
Saloon and join the wait list. And then other than that, you can find me on TikTok, jera.bean, and Instagram as well. And speaking as well, if anyone's listening who wants to hire me to come speak, teach virtually, in person. I love teaching teams and ambassadors and creators about short form video content or really anything about social media.
Oh, and you're so good at what you do. Who is the saloon for?
The saloon is primarily for service-based businesses. We've also had over 220 students. So we have had such a mix and range of students. So we also have content creators. I will say not influencers because we don't teach about influencing. It's more about really building your presence on social media. So it is very well fit for content creators. We do also have product-based businesses and businesses that I call collectives. Think like a marketing company, an HR consultancy, a dentist office, those who don't necessarily have a singular face to the business. So we have had those, but I will say out of all those options, it's most tailored for a service-based business.
Okay. I love that. And we'll make sure to put that wait list in the show notes. It's just such an incredible program. Like I said, I mean, I watched you build it out and I've watched you grow it and you've got support coaches and you've got like such a cool machine that you've built. And of course the branding is just next level. I love it. Your videos are my favorite. Okay. So a couple rapid fire questions before we go. Are you currently reading something or listening to something right now? And if so, what is it?
Oh gosh, I stopped reading it. I need to pick it back up, but I'm reading a fiction book called, oh my God, why can't I remember the name? Wait, hold on. Pause, Jess. I don't want to sound like an idiot. Let me look it up.
You're
Pause,
not an
pause,
idiot.
pause. Oh, I just remembered it as I was typing. Okay, here we go. We're starting again. I'm reading a fiction book called The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I've read her book before, The Goldfinch, which was amazing. So that's my current read of the moment.
Ooh, I love that. What did you want to be when you grew up, when you were a kid?
When I was little, I wanted to be either a veterinarian or an actor.
Oh, wow. Look at you. I didn't know that. Best piece of advice you've been given?
Feel the fear and do it anyway.
If I were to write you a check for $50,000 tomorrow that you had to use for the business, in or on the business, how would you allocate it?
Oh my God, that's really hard. Holy shit. Gosh, I would probably hire someone.
Oh, music to my ears.
Here's 50K up front. Fix all my delegation issues.
Oh my God, so good. Okay, and then the last question, we named it the Digital Business Evolution Podcast because we believe that your business is a reflection of you. And as we're always evolving and growing, so is our business. So what is your next personal or business evolution?
Gosh, honestly, probably related to what I brought up. I think one of my biggest pain points is that for the most part, I'm a one-woman show. If we really kind of go back at bird's eye view, and yes, I have like support coaches in the saloon, for example, who are absolutely incredible. But if I think about my business as a whole, it's really a one-woman show, which I still don't know how that's possible. It's like almost a little embarrassing to admit, but full honesty here. And I think it's been a mix of, one, I just have truly not had the time, even though I know I need help. I have not had the time to figure out what exactly I need help with and like really put time and energy into hiring someone, because I don't want to just say, hey, I need help. Like, I need to actually figure out what that role is. And I would say more in a mindset side, like giving up control, like no one can do it as perfect as I can. Like that's been something for me to get over as well. But I think in order to have a more balanced life and do this more sustainably, I definitely need help. So that would be my next step in my evolution with both my business, but that affects the personal as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to watch that unfold. I've patiently been waiting behind the scenes for that too, because I know what a difference it will make in the long run for you, for Aaron, for all of your clients, for anyone that follows you, and just the impact that you make. So I want to thank you so much for being on the show. This has been so much fun. We're definitely going to have you back. I love you. I adore you. I love everything you do. If you loved this episode, it would mean the world to Jera and I. If you took a screenshot and shared it, tag us at jera.bean. And I am Jessica DeRose. Let us know what some of your biggest takeaways were, your aha moments, and let us know when you're moving over to TikTok. I did start my own account there, and I have been starting to post a little bit more consistently. So I'll meet you on the TikTok. As always, cheers to your evolution. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you loved this episode, I invite you to be a part of our ripple effect and share it with a friend. And please, if you feel called, take 30 seconds to leave a 5-star review, and I'll be forever grateful. Until next time, cheers to your evolution.